Welcome to episode 5 of Steve's 2 Cents. This episode is about how I bet totals in MMA gambling, specifically under 1.5 rounds.
Shouts out Big Steve.
So this topic has been quite popular amongst people requesting it ever since I started the 2 Cent series. Mainly because if you know how I gamble, I like my totals, I like my unders, and I've become quite proficient at them. Wasn't always the case. I've posted a little slip in the corner to see my record on Bet MMA. Obviously, it's a bit outdated now, but you get the idea. 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 unders I usually hit, and that's mainly because I perfected my style. At the start, it used to be a money pit for me, and that was mainly because I didn't really cap unders and totals like I capped my money lines. I just looked at the under, I thought this is definitely finishing early, and then I just bet based on my confidence, and obviously that doesn't work. So I've made a style now. Obviously I'm quite disciplined with it, and it works for me, so I'll go over it. Hopefully it helps you guys out when it comes to betting unders, because it can be quite heartbreaking losing an under bet by a couple of seconds, as everyone knows. So the first and most important thing I do when I'm looking into the totals, the under 1.5 rounds, is obviously I take the fighters, research the fighters. And that goes without saying in any kind of betting, MMA, before you do anything, you research the fighter and you cap them and you give your own percentage on who's the value side. In this case, is there any value on the under? And obviously the main thing I look when I'm looking at unders, and I do take fights differently when I look at over-unders and money lines, is obviously the finishing upside on both sides and the durability. How likely the fighters are to finish each other, and how likely are they to be finished. If it's someone that you're more accustomed to in the UFC, obviously you're not going to spend as much time. This goes without saying, obviously taping and researching can be an episode in its own. So do your own due diligence, decide how much you tape, how much you research. Obviously, the more you research, the better reads you'll get, goes without saying. When I finish taping fighters, I like to look at their whole record and just make sure that I see the level of competition. A lot of the times a fighter can have a lot of finishes, but then you look at his record and it's a bunch of bums. And then when he takes that step up, he can't finish people anymore, and vice versa. A guy's a decision machine, but he's been fighting the top really durable guys on the regional scene. And when he gets a step down, he's running through them. So do your due diligence, make sure you're taping everything and even the level of competition. Once you've done the tape, what I do is I go back and I've got my capping process. I decide how the fight will play out, obviously up to the 1.5 rounds. And I look at every single instance and detail in which way my under 1.5 rounds bet can crash and burn. Right, so that sounds a bit tedious, but obviously it's important in this case because we only have 7.5 minutes to cash the bet. So any little issue that could kill it, it's important to identify. Not as tedious in money lines. Money line, you can kind of look at the broad spectrum of things. This guy's better at this and that, less durability, over 15 minutes. But with only 7.5 minutes, it's very important. So for example, I say you got a striker versus wrestler. The wrestler doesn't have the best takedowns, but he cage pushes a lot. I would write down if there's a lot of cage push, it might burn the clock. If a guy gets hurt and he wrestles as well and he's got recoverability, I would say that could be potential to crush the under. If a guy drops and hurts a lot of fighters, but he can't, he's really bad at finishing. Like for example, Matthew Semelsberger, if you guys know him from UFC, he's got like the best knockdown rate in the UFC, but he absolutely sucks at delivering the killer blow, the final blow, which is the worst for your unders. There's no point knocking someone down if you're not able to finish it. That's just a few examples. So I'd write them all down. And obviously you look at previous fights where they've gone over and what they've done wrong. So very specific things, and that this is where it's important to get into the nitty gritty of it. After that, I go back and then I retape the fights with those specific intricate ways of the total getting destroyed. And then I look at what the possibility of that is. So I just look at those things. So for example, if one of the ways the fight can go over, if one of the ways my bet will lose is due to cage push, if I see it once on tape, I will go back and I will literally note down how many seconds, how many minutes that specific fighter spends cage pushing, and how good or how bad the opponent is at getting off the cage, how many minutes and seconds he spends on the cage. So if he's proactive, if he rests against the cage, or if he just really wants to get out of there ASAP. This might sound extremely, extremely tedious, like going back and looking at it again, but I mean, especially for myself, my style, I don't make that many bets. I'm disciplined with them. And if I think I found a bet for the week and I'm, about to put 2,000 on it, maybe if it's 2 units, 4,000, which hasn't happened in a while, I want to cover all basics, right? If I lose 4,000 on a bet, that pretty much means I'm not profiting that weekend. Right? I don't have that many bets to get myself out of a hole. So I go back and I go, all right, cage push, a knockdown and gassing and bad finishing instincts, they could all kill it. Now let's go look at how many times he's knocked someone down. Let's have a look at if his opponent usually gets finished when he gets knocked down or if he's got good recoverability. So I go back and I look at that and I cross my dots and T's again with those specific avenues. And I'm always playing out the fight. Watching these two fighters, how it can go, how many times they'll clinch, if there'll be many knockdowns, and what are the chances of a finish. I hope that wasn't too confusing and it was easy to understand. But essentially, take the fighters, give each one a finishing percentage and how durable they are. Look at all the ways the fight can go over and it can play out. Obviously, it's a little bit easier because you don't have to worry about the whole 15 minutes, just up to the 7.5 minute mark. Sometimes I'll go till the end of round 2 because the fight might be a slower pace. And the end of round 2, you can see something that could happen in the first round and a half. And then obviously the last bit, go back, retape it again with a clear perspective on both fighters, strengths and weaknesses, what they do in each fight, what they do when they hurt, when they are close to getting finished, or what they do when they should be getting the finish. And then you can chuck your bet on and decide, do you want 1 unit, do you want 2 units or more, or do you just pass? Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder to cap. If it's really easy to cap, a lot of the time the line is going to be trash, right? You got 2 guys that are easy to knock out and 2 guys with power. Line's going to be like 80%. You're not going to get much value. But the beauty of the unders is going into these nitty-gritty details, being able to decipher yourself if there's value. There's a durable guy and the guy that won't be finished, but then you actually see that he's been dropped a lot, many times, and many times he was dropped under 7.5 minutes. And you see the guy that is fighting is actually a killer, and he can take advantage of that, unlike the other guys. So yeah, a lot of anecdotes, a lot of examples in 7.5s. It's obviously matchup dependent. For me, a lot of the time, the most important thing is finishing upside on both sides. If not, and if one guy is extremely durable and I don't see a finish, then I'm going to look at, the opponent that can finish and his finishing props, round 1, round 2, etc. But sometimes when you're looking at regionals and you don't have, finishing props and all you have is the money line and the total, it's a squash match, for example, I'll look at the under and focus on that fighter and give him the chance. How likely is he to finish this fighter? Because I don't have the props on him. So the total is the only thing I can bet, and I can bet more money on it. Usually I prefer the finishing on both sides. On some regionals and on fights that I only have the total and I don't have specific props for fighters, then I will also look at a one-sided beating, a squash match, and I'll give that fighter a percentage of how quickly can he finish the fight. Alrighty, that's it. That wraps it up. Like and subscribe. Hopefully that was somewhat clear. It is quite hard to explain because 1.5 is extremely detailed. But yeah, hopefully that at least helps you guys out. And good luck with your bets. Like and subscribe.